I'm Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. And here's what's happening. Scientists are collecting more data than ever before, but they're not necessarily publishing their findings in traditional peer-reviewed journals. Instead, they're using open access publications, pre-publishing services without peer review, and even Twitter and other social media tools to set themselves up for future funding and job offers rather than Nobel Prizes. And we're going to take a look at that.
And I'm Alan Calder, and I think of as scientists as apparently credible spokespeople for expensive PR campaigns. The more letters you have, the more you make, and the more credible you are. Can you buy a proven scientific result? What does that say about the rise of money and its impact on science?
I'm Brian Orlotti, and I think that the entire university system is changing just like the times, and especially since coronavirus and the lockdown. But I'd also like to remind everyone to like, comment, share, subscribe to support this vidcast on Patreon and PayPal. With that said and done, here are the stories we're currently tracking. And our first piece comes from universityaffairs.ca, titled COVID-19 Pandemic Shakes Up the World of Scientific Publishing by Damien Bracton. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been an explosion in the production of scientific articles and data. Publishers have geared up to publish content at an unprecedented rate and to provide open access to certain scientific publications. Researchers, meanwhile, are increasingly opting for online pre-publication platforms. Will the pandemic change the research culture or how results are made available in the future?
I would say, of course it will. The article talks about how the world has changed in the last 3 months or the last 6 months. It notes the money coming from China, and the money coming from China is a source of major changes in the system of scientific publications. It suggests that in the future, publications will even be written in Chinese, so we better all learn Chinese. It also talks about the growth of not just peer-reviewed publications. It talks about open access publications, which are kind of like software beta releases with everything expected to work, but a lot of glitches in the system and data available for validation, but not totally validated. Less real vetting prior to publication. I think that's the core.
I think the point of it is it gets out there before it's seen any peer review at all. You know, it makes the headline and then it becomes the news.
Absolutely, and that's more so in pre-publication. They're kind of like alpha software releases. Their first drafts, they're released explicitly for peer review, and I can't tell you the number of articles and publications that I've looked through for the last 4 months that talks about scientific certainty and facts, and you find the original peer-reviewed publication, it's not peer-reviewed, it's not factual, it's a pre-publication, and if you object to it, it'll go to the way of the dodo. So I don't know what to make of this.
It sounds like they're just pushing this stuff forward to speed the process up so no one has to look at it. Look at what they're doing with COVID. They're planning on not even doing any trials with it.
No, I tend to agree with that. In the sense of academics, they're doing this for money, for new resources, for financing to do new peer-reviewed studies for business and for academia. They're also doing it to get, I don't know, promoted. They want to go from assistant professor to full professor. They want to be senior academics. This is very little about science and a lot about money and a lot about careerism.
Yes, and it's also, I remember reading once about how during the Cold War, something like 50% of all scientific papers published worldwide were by the Soviet Union. So there was a correlation between an increase in power and prestige and the increase in their presence in the scientific world. It seems to be the same thing happening again with China growing in power and prestige. Now they're a greater force in the scientific world.
No, I tend to agree. I would note that COVID specifically, the money available for COVID research and studies has led to an explosion of scientific papers that come out in a variety of sources, the pre-publications. the open source publications, the peer-reviewed journal. And they try and make big things out of small sources of data. And for that, I would note the July 23rd, 2020 Foundation for Economic Education post. John Ioannidis, who's an academic, warned COVID-19 could be a once-in-a-century data fiasco. And he was right. And the article notes the shakeup in scientific publishing and how it's causing problems for not just scientists and their promotional opportunities, but also for journalists and for the general public, because there's an overall confusion regarding the different types of peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed publications, and an inability to validate or assess the experiments highlighted within the publications.
Did no one review his haircut, by the way? Like, who's he to judge anything?
I agree the guy's got a strange haircut, but you're looking at the man's mind.
I was kidding, sorry.
Yeah. I note that the article talks specifically about the famous case of a young Florida motorcyclist who died in a car accident, and his death was listed as a COVID-19 death because months previously he had tested for COVID-19 antibodies. He had tested positive, which means he got it and he had gone through it and there were no symptoms and he wasn't considered infectious. But he died in a motorcycle accident and he had coronavirus infection in his bloodstream. So he was listed as a COVID-19 death.
It's a terrible disease.
It'll kill you no matter what you die from.
I love what the doctor said about it too. You know, well, I don't know what killed him, but he had corona. Maybe that killed him.
The article specifically notes the different uses for medical terms like serology and viral tests, and evidently one tracks people with the disease, and one tracks people who have antibodies for the disease but aren't infected, according to the Center for Disease Control, and a half dozen nations that currently track the disease. Both types of positive viral tests contribute to the total of COVID-19 patients in the world.
That's not an accurate way to keep stats?
No, it's an awful way to keep stats.
Absolutely it is. But it's a good way to run the numbers up then. Like some of these things, I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead too much. People are getting counted with COVID 4 times separately as 4 cases. The same test.
Yeah, I heard. I read about that. I'll put the documentation in the show notes. But the tracking is really confusing. According to the article, it notes the guy in the title, and he says that nobody knows the true amount of COVID-19 cases, of course. But one thing both the left and the right of this highly political argument seem to agree upon is that the current data we have is junk. And yet the lesson we keep hearing is to trust the experts. And I would argue that the changes in academic publishing and the incredible amount of stupid money that's coming down the pipeline and the potential to get tenure, become an associate professor, become a full professor, these things are driving scientists crazy, and it's making them do really stupid things that they shouldn't do.
Oh, well, money talks, right? You don't need to do ruining the world just to ruin your part of the world, you know, for $1 million of life changing for you. I'd do it. Who wouldn't?
No, I agree. I also think the choices academics face when deciding how to release their findings, they are pragmatic. They relate to the visibility among the various audiences they need to make friends with, peers, potential collaborators, funders, and these other things are related to the cost to publish the paper. Peer-reviewed journals generally don't cost anything, but open source journals do cost because the writers tend to pay for the peer review, and the pre-publication journals they cost a lot in reputation, but they don't cost anything for anybody in particular, which is why they're the fastest out the door and they're the least control over.
Yeah, posting it on Facebook is not peer review, you know?
Yeah, but posting it on Facebook and getting people like you and I to comment on it, well, that's peer review.
Well, what's happening is that the people with money are buying the science to give the story they want to hear and publicated or publicized all across the world. Period. It's never been anything different ever. It's the same shit.
I think money dominates academia, much as academics will scream their heads off that it's not, and be offended by the insult to their integrity.
As they pop back into their Beamer, at 4
God
o'clock
damn
in
it,
the
Professor Department Head! Don't you understand? I need to put a new addition on my house.
I went to school for dozens of years. I'm so smart.
While his graduate students have to live on ramen noodles in a cup and live 5 to a room. Yeah.
Well, give it 20 years, you'll be fine.
Well, no, I noticed that far fewer graduate students are ever going to get to be professors compared to their parents and their grandparents, compared to the options available for the people who are professors and department heads now. Very few of the graduate students are ever going to see the promised land.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chuck. My cousin's actually, he is went to Guelph University, worked for Dow Chemical Corporation then, and car companies, and now he's doing his crappy work prior to professorship. He's going for his PhD though, and he's got a girl that loves him. That's good.
Yeah.
But it's such a crappy go though. He's like, I know I'm fucked. He's like, there's no one getting tenureship anymore.
He should have stayed.
You go, Brian.
I was just gonna say he should have stayed at Dow Chemical. Benefits, salary.
Yeah, well, the Dow Chemical, he was working actually in Detroit at one of the automotive plants, like in the plant, working on it like that, like plant paint kind of thing, whatever the hell, something like that. So
I'm
when
sure
they started shutting him down, he left and came back to do whatever, go back and hide again.
he shouldn't have. He would have been better off in any other private sector job.
Hey, listen, I think that I'm not sure 100%, but I'm fairly sure that his job left him though. Like they shut a fat plant down he was at.
Yeah. Here's another question. Not just academics. They're happy to live on ramen and noodles. I myself eat them every once in a while. They're not a bad thing.
Were you an academic?
No, I'm not. I'm kind of a wanderer. But I'm also a journalist, and journalists and the public need to be educated on the differences between the various forms of academic publishing. Wouldn't that help people understand all of these incredible things that are coming down the pipeline about how, Brian, you had a friend at York University 3 years ago. He wrote about how we can make 10-mile-high towers to the sky and launch rocket ships from them, and he was expecting this to happen by 2021.
Yeah.
And you and I both knew that he didn't really believe that, but it made a good story and it got him funding for other projects.
Yep.
Slipping back into academia, I also think it's worth noting the scientific replication crisis. It's an ongoing, they call it methodological crisis, because they can't reproduce any of the results in like half of the scientific experiments. And scientific experiments, by definition, are supposed to be reproducible. And according to what I've read, I've got a couple of links, I'll include them in the show notes. About half the scientific conclusions drawn in peer-reviewed journals, not the cheap ones, not the open access journals, not the pre-publications that haven't been checked out at all, but in the high quality peer-reviewed publication, half of the results cannot be reproduced.
Yeah, I mean that half of science is lying or failing at what they're meant to do.
Half of science might just be religious.
Huh.
Sounds like
Sorry, Greg.
Sounds like people aren't be able to reproduce the results. There must be something faulty with the method.
Could be, and I place this squarely at the foot of the peer-reviewed journals. If the peer-reviewed journals don't put out a methodology that allows for a robust examination of the data and the ability to reproduce the results, those peer-reviewed journals are crap.
And our next piece is Why College is Never Coming Back by Stephen McBride at Forbes. Here's some great news. One of America's most broken industries is finally being exposed as a sham. And make no mistake, the end of college as we know it is a great thing. It's great for families who'll save money and take on less debt putting kids through school. It's great for kids who will no longer be lured into the socialist indoctrination centers that many American campuses have become. And as I'll show you, it's great for investors who stand to make a killing on the companies that'll disrupt college for good.
Solidarity forever, gentlemen.
Solidarity forever. Very well done. I hate to say things like Bill Gates all the time,
Yeah.
but I remember when my son was was younger in grade school, like I was trying to like help him as well as I could do, as a parent. I'm not in class, what do I know? And so he had this program. I wish I could recall the name of it was, but some Indian dude, he was giving talks about math, simple math stuff, and how to do it, and it's examples and and the test to do and things like that. And my son was very young at the time, and he's starting to pick it up, like how they teach math in Singapore. And I'm like, that's fantastic, and that was a Bill Gates initiative. I wish I could recall the name, but they do everything now, like history and stuff like that. It's just not worth, how much it costs? $0, right?
No, I agree.
Well, see, this is where I gotta disagree. I mean, yes, it's companies are willing to look at people who don't have university degrees, and they're willing to look at practical experience and so forth. But having the degree from an institution, the vast bulk of job ads that I look at, they still require some form of post-secondary degree. And also, not just for the piece of paper itself, but there is the argument to be made that college, there's the social aspect of it, the networking, the personal growth. I'm not going to...
With all due respect, Brian, most colleges are coming back in the fall without the personal interaction, without the campus. Students in the fall will have 8 hours a day of Zoom meetings.
Yes, but that's
really?
driven by necessity, not by any conscious prior decision on the colleges, universities.
Yeah, I would say that is driven by necessity.
It was decided for the colleges, though, at least,
That is what this article is arguing. It's arguing that these Zoom meetings really screw up the social aspect of college, but it also argues that college costs have ballooned beyond reason. They've risen even faster than healthcare costs. Kids are buying themselves a huge amount of debt, 1.6 trillion at last count, and this is debt they're never going to pay back, and they're doing it to attend college for the social aspects. But the social aspects, this is no better than any other Zoom meeting that organizes for free and lets you contribute.
But me and Chuck used to work for a conference industry then, which means that what we do is pay people charge them outrageous amounts of money to come and hang out with each other and listen to each other talk. We're paying $2,500 per person for 2 days for this garbage. You know what? That on Zoom will never have the same interaction. No one can get drunk and whisper something to someone, ask real questions like that. And it's not the same thing at all. No one's gonna have affairs over Zoom,
And having that piece of paper for the time being is still a decisive factor in a lot of places for getting a job.
I would argue that while a piece of paper is decisive up to a point, Al, you and I have gone to meetings with aerospace companies and educational facilities. And the educational facilities say that once they've got the preliminary piece of paper, the BA, they want to get the kid out of college before he gets a master's and is completely corrupted by the system.
Yeah, so go into entry-level job with 3 years experience directly from school is what they're looking for.
Yeah, they don't want anybody with a master's or with a PhD. That corrupts them. They want to get them out while they're still halfway sane.
And they knew that they couldn't live up to their end of the bargain by giving the jobs that there was no jobs for what they were doing in schools for. And that was the part of the meetings that we had. And that's Siemens too, big company too.
Yeah. And I would argue that Siemens was there. A lot of other big companies were there. And they would say that, people with degrees in university, we take them out of university, it takes them 3 or 4 or 5 years before they're good for anything, and they're even potentially capable of paying their own way. University and jobs, especially high technology jobs, generally don't fit.
Well, I think that you take like a soft skills, like we'll say law, for example.
Yeah.
You have to have a bachelor's to go to law school. It's just another bachelor's, but you don't learn how to practice law until after you graduate with a master's degree, and then you can start learning how to practice law. But that's why you have articling for 8 months, because you have to learn how to do it, because they don't teach you in school.
The first 3 years shows an indication of whether or not you can learn, and then they pull you out and they teach you the real stuff. I think the article notes that the COVID-19 virus has forced practically every college to move their courses online for the next semester, starting in September. So instead of living on campus and walking to lectures and meeting people and learning from individuals and socializing, and not just from your professors. Kids will be sitting in their bedrooms watching professors on Zoom calls. Brian, you do that now for your work. How do you think about that?
I think it's, especially after 4 or 5 months of it, it becomes nerve-wracking. And human beings are social animals. We need contact with each other. We need to talk to each other. We need to be in the same room as each other. And that's why I don't think that it's going to be, I don't see the death of university, and I don't see online learning as becoming permanent.
No, like I agree with 100% with Brian. Then,
Yeah.
like it'll be an addendum to it more so than a replacement for it.
Yeah, I would argue that the current coronavirus pandemic is far more disruptive than most folks realize. College is much more than just the learning. It's about the education, it's about the experience. The learning part's barely changed in a century, and I don't know anybody who went to university who remembers anything they learned in class. But I do remember my friends in university. I do remember the parties we went to. I do remember the political activism we did and the protests we went to and the things we learned over beer in the bar with the professor. I had a professor who would join us in the bar, and we got some of our best stories told then. And I don't honestly think teenagers are willing to mortgage their future for college video lectures done on the internet to Zoom. I think it's too easy to get Zoom training on things for far less cost than college programs.
And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes. Keep in touch with us on Facebook, Gab, LinkedIn, Minds, Pinterest, Steemit, and Twitter. Check out other stories we're tracking on our innovation news and upcoming events Scoop It feeds. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment on our posts. Your actions will feed the algorithms and bots which help to distribute our stories.
If you'd like to promote your event or your activity, or if you think you have insights into Canada's current innovation economy, then please send me an email. I'm at chuck.black@protonmail.com.
And we're currently on YouTube, BitChute, and hope to be on other platforms soon. If you like the content we create, send some money to our Patreon and PayPal accounts. We do really appreciate your patronage.
And that's all for this week. Check out our comments for insights from associate producer John Pentern. And remember, we'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.